Captain Sarah Martinez crouched behind the concrete barrier, her heart pounding as enemy fire echoed through the abandoned village. The mission had seemed straightforward when they received orders 3 days ago. Rescue the captured intelligence, officer from the enemy compound, and extract valuable information about upcoming attacks. But nothing had gone according to plan since they crossed into hostile territory. Her squad of 8 soldiers had been reduced to 5 after yesterday's ambush. Rodriguez was badly wounded, barely able to walk, while Thompson kept checking his ammunition with nervous fingers. The enemy knew they were coming, which meant someone had leaked their mission details. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was all a trap, but they had to complete the mission. The intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Walsh, supposedly held crucial information about a planned terrorist attack on civilian targets back home. As Sarah studied the compound through her binoculars, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The building structure was all wrong for a prison facility. It looked more like a medical facility or research center. Strange vehicles were parked outside, and people in white coats moved between buildings. This wasn't matching their briefing materials at all. She radioed back to headquarters but received only static in response. Their communication had been jammed for the past 6 hours. Rodriguez crawled up beside her, his face pale from blood loss. He whispered that he had overheard enemy radio chatter suggesting they were expecting the American rescue team. Even more disturbing, he heard references to the doctor and the experiment. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of facility were they really approaching? And why did their own intelligence reports contain so many discrepancies about this location? The sun was setting, which would provide better cover for their approach. But Sarah faced an impossible decision. Should she risk her remaining soldiers' lives to rescue someone who might not even be there? Or should she abort the mission and try to get her wounded team to safety? Every instinct told her something was terribly wrong. But abandoning a fellow officer went against everything she believed in. As darkness fell, she made her choice. They would proceed with the mission, but she would trust no one except her own soldiers from this point forward. Moving under cover of darkness, Sarah's team approached the compound's outer perimeter. The facility was larger than expected, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. Security seemed lighter than anticipated for such an important prisoner, which only increased Sarah's suspicions. She positioned her soldiers strategically around the main building, while she and Thompson prepared to infiltrate. Inside the facility, the corridors were eerily quiet except for the hum of machinery and occasional footsteps. Medical equipment lined the walls, and Sarah noticed laboratories filled with computers and testing apparatus. This definitely wasn't a standard military prison. As they moved deeper into the building, they discovered holding cells, but most were empty. In one room, they found files scattered across desks, documents in multiple languages discussing psychological experimentation and behavior modification techniques. Thompson suddenly grabbed Sarah's arm and pointed down a hallway. Through a small window in a reinforced door, they could see a figure sitting in what appeared to be an interrogation room. The man was wearing a torn American military uniform, but something seemed off about his posture and behavior. He was rocking back and forth, muttering to himself, and didn't respond when Sarah carefully called out the identification codes they had been given for Lieutenant Colonel Walsh. As they prepared to breach the room, Sarah heard voices approaching from behind. Enemy soldiers were conducting a routine patrol, and her team would be discovered within minutes. She had to make a split-second decision: attempt the rescue now and risk exposing their position, or wait and potentially lose their only chance to save the prisoner. The man in the room suddenly looked directly at them through the window, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. Fear. But not the kind of fear you would expect from a captured soldier hoping for rescue. It was the fear of someone who had been broken in ways that couldn't be easily repaired. Thompson whispered urgently that they needed to move immediately. The patrol was getting closer, and their extraction window was narrowing. Sarah realized that even if they successfully rescued this person, they might not be saving Lieutenant Colonel Walsh at all. The psychological damage was obvious, and she wondered what horrible experiments had been conducted on him. But leaving him here felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for as a soldier. She signaled to Thompson, and they prepared to breach the door, knowing that this decision would change everything for her remaining team members. The breach was swift and silent. Sarah and Thompson secured the room while the prisoner looked at them with confused, frightened eyes. When Sarah spoke the recognition codes, the man responded correctly, confirming he was indeed Lieutenant Colonel Walsh. But his mental state was clearly compromised. He kept asking about dates from months ago and seemed unable to process that a rescue team had arrived. His hands shook constantly and he flinched at every sound. While Thompson kept watch, Sarah tried to extract information from Walsh about the planned terrorist attacks. His responses were fragmented and often contradictory. He spoke about cities that didn't match their intelligence reports and mentioned dates that had already passed. Most disturbing were his references to the treatments and how they made him remember things differently. Sarah realized that the enemy had been using advanced psychological manipulation techniques on him, possibly making any intelligence he possessed unreliable or completely false. Outside, Rodriguez radioed that enemy reinforcements were approaching the compound. Their extraction helicopter was still 30 minutes away, and they needed to move immediately. But Walsh was in no condition to travel quickly, and carrying him would slow them down significantly. Sarah faced another terrible choice: risk her entire team to save one psychologically damaged officer, or make the strategic decision to prioritize the lives of her healthy soldiers. As they prepared to move Walsh, he suddenly grabbed Sarah's arm with surprising strength. His eyes became momentarily clear and he whispered something that made her blood freeze. He said that the real terrorist attack wasn't what their intelligence suggested at all. The enemy had been feeding false information through him, knowing that a rescue attempt would eventually be made. The actual target was the military base where their families lived, and the attack was scheduled to begin in less than 12 hours. Sarah realized they had walked directly into an elaborate trap. The enemy had wanted them to rescue Walsh specifically so he could deliver this false intelligence, creating a diversion while the real attack proceeded elsewhere. But now she faced an impossible moral dilemma. Was Walsh telling the truth in this moment of clarity? Or was this just another layer of the psychological manipulation he had endured? The lives of hundreds of military families might depend on her decision to believe him, or dismiss his warning as the product of a broken mind. Sarah made the decision to trust Walsh's warning, despite the risks. She radioed their backup frequency, hoping to reach any friendly forces who could relay a message to base security. Static filled her earpiece, but after several attempts, she made contact with a communications officer at a nearby forward operating base. The officer was skeptical about Walsh's intelligence, especially given his compromised mental state, but agreed to pass along the warning. Moving through the compound proved more difficult than expected. Walsh's physical condition had deteriorated during his captivity, and he struggled to keep pace with the team. Thompson and Rodriguez took turns supporting him, while Sarah and the others provided security. Enemy searchlights swept the area, and they could hear vehicles approaching from multiple directions. The facility's alarm system had been activated, and their window for escape was rapidly closing. In the main laboratory building, Sarah discovered files that confirmed her worst fears. The documents detailed extensive psychological experimentation programs designed to create false memories and plant misleading information in captured soldiers. Walsh had been a test subject for months, and the enemy had carefully crafted the intelligence he believed he possessed. Even more disturbing, the files suggested that similar programs were being conducted on other captured American personnel. As they reached the compound's outer fence, explosions erupted behind them. The enemy was using heavy weapons to prevent their escape, showing just how valuable they considered this operation. Rodriguez, already weakened from his earlier wounds, was struck by shrapnel and went down hard. Sarah faced another agonizing decision: stop to treat Rodriguez and risk capture for the entire team, or continue the evacuation and leave him behind. Thompson argued they couldn't save everyone, while Walsh, in a moment of clarity, insisted they couldn't abandon a wounded soldier. The helicopter extraction point was still half a mile away, across open terrain that offered little cover. Enemy forces were converging on their position from 3 directions, and carrying both Rodriguez and Walsh would make them easy targets. Sarah realized that completing this mission successfully might require sacrifices that would haunt her forever. She had to decide quickly which lives she could save and which principles she was willing to compromise. The weight of command had never felt heavier as she calculated their chances of survival against the moral cost of her choices. Sarah refused to leave Rodriguez behind. She ordered Thompson and the others to create a defensive perimeter while she applied emergency medical treatment to Rodriguez's wounds. The shrapnel had caused serious damage, but he was conscious and determined to continue. Walsh, despite his psychological trauma, surprised everyone by helping to bandage Rodriguez's injuries with steady hands, as if the immediate crisis had temporarily cut through his mental fog. The team moved as one unit toward the extraction point, carrying Rodriguez between them. Enemy fire intensified as they crossed the open ground, forcing them to take cover behind scattered boulders and abandoned vehicles. Sarah coordinated their movement while maintaining radio contact with the extraction helicopter, which reported heavy anti-aircraft fire in the area. The pilot warned that he might not be able to land at the original extraction point. During a brief lull in the fighting, Walsh pulled Sarah aside and shared more details about what he had learned during his captivity. The psychological experiments weren't just about planting false information. They were testing techniques for mass manipulation that could be used against civilian populations. The research data in the facility represented years of work that could potentially be used to influence elections, create civil unrest, or undermine public trust in government institutions. Sarah realized they faced a larger moral dilemma than just completing their rescue mission. Should they attempt to destroy the facility and its research data, even if it meant risking their own escape? The strategic value of eliminating this psychological warfare program might outweigh the immediate tactical concerns of getting her team to safety. But such a decision would require her to potentially sacrifice lives for a greater good, a calculation that went against every instinct she had as a leader. The extraction helicopter finally appeared on the horizon, but enemy surface-to-air missiles immediately engaged it. The pilot reported damage but confirmed he could still attempt a landing. Sarah had minutes to decide whether to call for additional air support to destroy the facility, knowing it would delay their evacuation and increase the risk to her wounded soldiers. Walsh urged her to make the call, arguing that the research data was too dangerous to leave intact. Rodriguez, despite his injuries, agreed that the mission was bigger than their individual survival. Sarah stared at the facility in the distance, knowing that her next decision would define not only the outcome of this mission, but the kind of leader she truly was. Sarah made the difficult decision to call for an airstrike on the facility while proceeding with the evacuation. She transmitted the coordinates to friendly forces while her team fought their way to the landing zone. The helicopter pilot, despite his aircraft's damage, managed a controlled descent under heavy fire. Thompson and the others provided covering fire as they loaded Rodriguez and Walsh onto the helicopter. As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah watched through the window as precision missiles struck the research facility. Explosions lit up the night sky and she felt a mixture of relief and regret. They had prevented dangerous psychological warfare technology from being perfected, but the cost had been enormous. Her team had survived, but barely, and she wondered how many other facilities like this one existed in remote locations around the world. During the flight back to base, Walsh's condition seemed to improve slightly. The immediate danger and physical activity appeared to have broken through some of the psychological conditioning he had endured. He was able to provide more coherent information about the facility's operations and confirmed that several other American personnel were being held at similar locations. This intelligence would be crucial for planning future rescue operations. Rodriguez received immediate medical attention during the flight, and the medic reported that his injuries, while serious, were not life-threatening. The team's survival was a testament to their training and Sarah's leadership, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they had only glimpsed the surface of a much larger and more sinister operation. The enemy's psychological warfare capabilities were far more advanced than anyone had suspected. As they approached the base, Sarah began mentally preparing her after-action report. She would need to explain her decisions to strike the facility, the intelligence they had gathered, and the condition of the rescued officer. But more importantly, she would need to recommend immediate action to locate and rescue other captured personnel before they could be subjected to the same psychological manipulation that had nearly destroyed Walsh's mind. The mission was complete, but Sarah realized it was really just the beginning of a much larger battle against an enemy who fought with weapons that couldn't be seen or easily defended against. 3 weeks after the mission, Sarah sat in a secure briefing room facing a panel of senior officers. Her detailed report had triggered a comprehensive investigation into enemy psychological warfare programs, and several similar facilities had been identified through satellite reconnaissance. The intelligence Walsh provided, once verified and cross-referenced with other sources, proved invaluable in understanding the scope of the enemy's capabilities. Walsh was receiving intensive medical and psychological treatment at a specialized military facility. His recovery was slow but steady, and doctors were optimistic about his long-term prognosis. The false memories and planted information were gradually being separated from his authentic experiences, though the process would take months or possibly years to complete. He had specifically requested to thank Sarah and her team for not abandoning him, despite the risks involved. Rodriguez had fully recovered from his injuries and returned to active duty. The experience had strengthened the bond between all team members, and they had requested to remain together for future operations. Thompson had been promoted and was being considered for specialized training in counter-psychological warfare techniques. The entire team had become experts in recognizing and responding to these new forms of enemy manipulation. Sarah learned that her decision to destroy the research facility had prevented the completion of a major psychological operation targeting military families. The enemy had planned to use mass media and social networks to spread panic and disinformation, potentially causing significant harm to civilian morale and military readiness. Her quick thinking and willingness to take calculated risks had saved countless lives and protected national security interests. In her final meeting with the review board, Sarah was commended for her leadership and decision-making under extreme pressure. She was offered promotion and assignment to a new counterintelligence unit focused on combating psychological warfare threats. As she accepted the position, Sarah reflected on the lessons learned during the mission. True courage wasn't just about physical bravery in combat. It was about making difficult moral decisions when lives hung in the balance, trusting your instincts when information was unreliable, and never abandoning the principles that defined what it meant to be a soldier. The mission had tested every aspect of her character, and she had emerged stronger and more determined to protect others from the invisible weapons that threatened not just bodies, but minds and souls.